So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Planning Development Control. I'm Therese Evans, the chair of the meeting, and it's Thursday, the 21st of October, 9:30. A few introductions. The members of the committee are sitting on either side, and they all got name plates in front of them. Then the vice chair, Councillor Rutter, is sitting on my left, and on my right we've got Julie Pinnock, who's the service lead for the built environment, Catherine Knight, who's the legal lead today, Simon Avery, who's the case officer, and Matthew Watson, who's the Democratic Services officer, and he is controlling the clock for the public speaking. I'm sorry about the slight chill, but this is government rules and COVID, and where would we be without COVID? So you've all used the hand sanitizer on entry into the room. It's also available for you when you want to use it, and you're all sitting in a socially distanced manner. These will have to be cleaned in between applications, but presumably everybody is leaving. Please would you maintain the 2-metre distance at all times, and if you want to walk around the room, please would you wear your face mask, unless you've got a health reason not to, but you don't have to put the face mask on if you're sat down for long periods of time. Then we have to leave the door open and some skylight windows as well. I'm on health and safety. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, but if you hear an alarm, it's the real deal. So please obey instructions from the marshal and leave the building by the route that they indicate. Please do not use the lift, and the assembly point is in Abbey Gardens next door. And yes, there won't be any re-entry until the matter has been resolved. Final reminder, please could you make sure that your phones are on silent or turned off or in airplane mode. We move to the agenda. Apology for deputy members.
Morning, Chair. Thank you. So we've had apologies from Councillor Pearson and Councillor Westwood. Councillor Pearson's been replaced today by Councillor Cunningham, and Councillor Bronk is replacing Councillor Westwood. All deputy members, Chair, would provide you with the same document pack as full members of the committee at the same time.
Thank you, and welcome Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Bronk. Any interest? We normally actually declare those before the application. We've got 2 previous meetings to agree the minutes. First of all, the 20th of September. Are those agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And then the 29th of September. Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. And then we have the update sheet, which we have to accept as an addendum to the report. Is that agreed? Agreed. And we move on then to the first planning application, which is in front of you, Coventry House, 21/01727/4. The case officer is Simon Avery, and Simon, when you're ready, we're ready to hear your presentation. Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot there is actually a legal point which Catherine Knight would like to announced to the meeting, and it is concerning the current JR. Catherine?
Thank you, Chair. Members, you've received, and we all have, a number of correspondence in the last few days. That correspondence relates to the current judicial review. I just want to stress that the judicial review is separate to the material you have before you today. You are required by law to consider this application on the material presented to you, and the judicial review that is currently ongoing is immaterial to your decision.
Thank you very much. So, as we were, Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just one further update on top of the update sheet. The final count of letters of objection received in response to the amended plans, which were submitted on the 1st of October, is 71 letters from 58 households. Okay, so if we turn to the slides, just looking at the first slide here, just to get our bearings, the application site is marked in red in the centre of this slide, so it's within the city of Winchester towards the south-eastern edge of the city in the Bar End area. You look at the image to the right of this, this also shows the application site in relation to the settlement boundary. So the blue boundary, this is from the local plan, blue line shows the settlement boundary. So you can see the site is within the settlement boundary, but it is close to the countryside. Another helpful plan is this one here, which shows the site in relation to the South Downs National Park. So again, it's another blue line indicating the boundary of the park. And you can see that the park is very close to the site, adjacent to the west, and then significantly to the south. And we've got important areas such as St Catherine's Hill. Just a closer look at the site. So it's marked in red here, just to zoom in and look at some of the surrounding uses and buildings. So it's substantially within a commercial kind of ribbon of development. To the north of the site, we've got the Biffa depot. To the east, immediately, you've got a Citroen garage and other commercial industrial buildings around. To the south, we've got the Bar End Park and Ride and other industrial commercial buildings to the south of that. To the east, there we've got some residential properties, got St Catherine's Court here to the southeast of the site, and the terraced properties on Bar End Road to the east of that, the new Bar End roundabout. And then to the west, the character changes quite significantly. We've got Doman Road, which is an unmade road running along parallel with the western boundary of the site, and the properties on that road. And then you've got the Itchen Navigation Canal to the west of that, and then the countryside. To show you an aerial photo of the site, which is helpful. So the site's in the centre here. This was taken, I think, after obviously the building formerly on the site was demolished. The site's empty here. Again, you can see the Biffa building to the north, Park and Ride to the south. As you see, the new leisure centre substantially constructed to the east. And again, you've got Doman Road and properties on it to the west. Important to note, there's a heavily treed embankment running along the west of these commercial sites. I'll show some photos of that in a moment. And then we've got the Itchen Navigation Canal and the countryside further to the west. Just show you some photos. So this is the building that was formerly on the site, called Coventry House. So it occupies quite a large proportion of the site we used to, and a couple of photos beneath that showing what it looked like. This is a current view of the site. So this is taken this with the bar and roundabout at my back. I'm looking coming on to Barfield Close. This is the Citroen garage in the foreground, and then this is the entrance to the site with the eastern stair core partly constructed. This is a closer view of that entrance and the stair core. The image at the top then shows the site as previously with Coventry House in it at that entrance. This is from the south of the site, so this is the Park and Ride, Bar End Park and Ride. So the bottom image shows again the multi-storey partly constructed here, and the top image shows before that when it wasn't in place. This is the north of the site, so there's a footpath. This is the Biffa depot. There's a footpath running along the northern edge of this, leading down to Doman Road, which you can look back through and just see the site in the middle here. And then some views from Doman Road. So this is Doman Road heading south, and gives you an idea of this embankment, which I mentioned, which I'm sure members will be familiar with. So it's quite a steep embankment, heavily treed. The photo on the right is then looking up, giving you an idea of the level differences towards the site. And then some photos from the countryside. So this is an important view from Wharf Bridge, looking down the navigation canal. You can make out the site because of the crane keeping up at the top of the trees here. So the site is behind that bank of trees. This is also important to note. This is the point, the south of Winchester, where you enter the national park. Just walking down that side of the navigation canal on the footpath here, again looking towards the site, you can see where it is because of the crane and the heavy bank of trees. Going further along that path again, just giving you an idea of where the site is in relation to that. Again, we've gone past the site now to the south of it, so to speak, the southwest. Again, the crane obviously denotes where the site is in relation to this photo. So the proposal for members is for a multi-story car park, 287 spaces. So this is the site plan. 33 of the spaces actually are outside of the proposed building along the north and the east boundary. The remaining spaces are across 3 levels within this building. I'll just quickly show you some elevations of it. I'll go into more detail about the design a little bit later. So the top image is the north elevation. This will be facing towards the Biffa depot. Below that, we've got the east elevation, which is facing towards the Barfield Close and towards the new roundabout. So this is towards the entrance of the site. And then the top image on this slide is the south elevation. So this will be facing towards the Bar End Park and Ride. And then below that, we've got the west elevation, which faces towards Doman Road. I'll just quickly show you some sections as well of the building to illustrate how the levels will work. So there's basically 3 levels to the multi-storey car park, but the building is split into 2 segments. So there's a ground 0 level, then you move up half a level into the other segment, and then with these ramps, work your way up the different levels. So it's a fairly standard arrangement for a multi-storey car park. So the matters to be considered, the issues to be considered, starting with principle of development. As we've seen, the site is within the settlement boundary of Winchester. There's some key policies relating to the City of Winchester, policy WT1 and WIN1, local plan policies which are pertinent, and they encourage sustainable transport options for development, and they encourage carbon neutral development. Another key consideration is the Winchester movement strategy, and this strategy actually identifies this site as an important one to develop as a park and ride, or a park and stride into the city. The plan we're looking at here shows the existing park and ride sites in yellow and the proposed site in red. It illustrates the footpath links into the city centre. So the main committee report, which is Appendix 1 to this document, goes into a lot of detail about the policy, but to summarise, the application is considered to be in accordance with these key policies and the Winchester movement strategy. A couple of other things to pick up on the principle. The site was previously a commercial site, so it had a B1 use, the Coventry House building. So you have to consider whether there's a loss of employment. In fact, this has already been resolved through an earlier application which allowed a surface car park on the site. So the loss of employment, which would be covered by policy CP9, is already established as acceptable. Just picking up also on transport issues here, there's a transport statement submitted with the application which has considered carefully the traffic generation and impacts of that resulting from this proposal, and concluded that there's minimal impact on the highway network from this proposal. In terms of principle of development, officers are satisfied that the application is acceptable. Just looking at some of the more detailed issues to be considered. So starting with design and layout, which is very important. So the applicant has done a contextual survey of the area, which is set out in their design and access statement, and looked carefully at the various constraints and options available. There are certain constraints on the site. So there's an existing access which has to be used. There's also a sewer which has an easement along, which affects where the building can be located, so it can't be pushed any closer to the northern and eastern boundaries. So the position of the building is considered to be acceptable, has been kept away to some extent from the more sensitive western and southern boundaries to allow for some additional planting in here. So officers are satisfied that in terms of its layout and positioning on site, it's been considered carefully and is acceptable. Just going back to the elevation, so it's a multi-storey car park, there's a certain limitation in terms of how these can be laid out. So a key element of such buildings really is going to be their external appearance, and this has been considered carefully by the applicant. The sensitive sides of the building particularly are those facing towards the national parks at the south and the west. And a key sort of strategy has been to ensure that the external colouring and materials are appropriate. So on these elevations, there's a substantial amount of dark brown cladding, and that colour has been chosen very carefully in discussion with officers to ensure that it's very recessive dark colour, which won't be visually intrusive. On the western elevation as well, which is very sensitive, facing Doman Road and the Itchen Navigation Canal, it's proposed to have this green wall covering a lot of the elevation, and this is able to do this through having a series of steel wires, basically, which the planting will grow up. And the landscape team have looked at this and are satisfied that this would be successful. So that's been carefully considered. The cladding as well on this sensitive side on the upper deck is up to full height to ensure that it hides the lighting columns and provides full screening of the PV panels on the roof. So just to say as well then, a big chunk of the roof, the upper deck, is to be covered by a roof which will have solar panels on it. This has been again carefully designed to keep its profile down and also allow the panels to be at the right angle to capture the light, obviously. So just looking at the other two elevations, which are slightly less sensitive. So the northern one faces towards the Biffa building. So this is only a part of this is to be clad in the darker cladding on the more sensitive corner, and the rest of it will have these metal mesh balustrades. And then the eastern elevation, which has an element of sensitivity because it faces towards Barfield Close. Again, there's proposed to be some green walling here. And just to say, there's two stair cores in the building, one on the western side and one on the eastern side. And these are proposed to be finished in dark grey, which is also considered to be an appropriate colour and finish. Another important aspect of the design is the landscaping. It's part of the sort of comprehensive design approach. As I said, there's space being allowed along the western and the southern boundaries to allow some additional planting. So some larger trees are going along the southern boundary, which in time will provide good screening, and more medium-sized planting along the western boundary, which will help screen as you look up back from Doman Road in the sort of lower below canopy area of the existing trees. So officers are satisfied that the building has been, and the site has been well designed, and it's been done in a contextual way. So following on from this, an important consideration is the impact of the development on the character of the area. And in a moment, I'll be asking my colleague Kitty Morgans to come up and just give her conclusions to the terms of the landscape impact, which is our landscape architect. I'll just first of all run through a series of slides. So we've had that submitted a landscape and visual appraisal, and this document basically looks at the site from a series of carefully selected locations and considers the impact that it will have. So this slide in front of you, you can see the detail, shows where those views are taken from. Most of them are from the west or the northwest of the site, which is the sensitive area of countryside. There's one further to the north, which is St Giles Hill, and there's 3 further to the south, 2 of them on St Catherine's Hill, and one of them further the other side of the motorway on Pilgrim's Trail. So I'll quickly show you those. And just to say as well, the landscape team, council's landscape team, were concerned, as well as the normal sort of landscape and visual impact, they were concerned about nighttime impact and lighting. So they asked the applicant to focus on a couple of these views, particularly in terms of nighttime impact. And an addendum report was submitted looking at these views. So I'll show you some images from that as well. So if I quickly go through these views. So this is view number 1, which is taken from Doman Road. And you can see the arrow pointing down to where the site would be. So there would be some filtered views of the site in this view. This is view 2, further from the north, on the path on Rack Hill. And the landscape visual appraisal concludes that the planting vegetation along the southern edge of this area would substantially screen the site, where there would be some limited views of it. This is now from Wharf Bridge, which is an important view, and the appraisal is showing the extent of the site at the top here, but behind this bank of trees. So there is a substantial amount of a barrier here from the trees. Then view 4 is walking south along that massive path along the Itching Canal and looking directly west towards the site between some of the properties on Doman Road. And there are some limited views between the trees. It's taken in winter of the site here. This is slightly further south on the same footpath. Again, the appraisal shows the extent of the site, but again, be behind this tall bank of trees. This is one of the views that landscape officer particularly wanted the applicant to assess more carefully. This is a view of the same view in summer, just illustrating the extent, obviously, that the planting will have filled out at that time of year. And then also looking at it in winter, analysing what the existing lighting is. So there's some lighting from related to properties on Doman Road. The addendum document has considered carefully what lighting would come from the site in winter when the bank of trees is less dense, and concluded there would be perhaps some diffused lighting, but the cladding on the building and the general arrangement of the site would mean that there would be very little light or negligible light intrusion on this view. This is view 6, so we're now looking at the edges of the entrenchments on St Catherine's Hill. Again, the site is relatively well screened from here. You can see that grey building there is the Biffa building, but this line of trees here generally provide quite a good screening from the site. Further up St Catherine's Hill, again showing where the site would be slightly more screened from here. This is one of the views that, again, the landscape officer wanted particular attention given to. This is a view in summer, again showing how much more screened, obviously, at this time of year. And then a nighttime view, picking up some of the lighting that you can see. So the lighting you can see towards the bottom here is some of the other industrial buildings, Barfield, far end. The lighting to the right is the leisure centre. The general scattered lighting behind this is mostly St Giles's Hill. So again, this analysed carefully the lighting that would come from the application site. There would be some lighting visible from the upper deck, but it's considered, the conclusion was that it would be red, no more sort of impact than the lighting that comes up on St Giles's Hill. View 8 is from the Pilgrim's Trail. So this is quite somewhere away, a kilometre away to the south, roughly the southeast, the other side of the M3 motorway. So again, it is quite a long view away, and there are fairly minimal views. And then the final view in the appraisal is from the north, Giles Hill, and again, this illustrating that there's quite a lot of vegetation intervening between the site and this view, so there's a minimal impact. Just quickly show you, so that the addendum report also gives photos illustrating some of the existing lighting around and about the site. So this is on Doman Road, street light here. Just quickly show you these. This is also near the Biffa building and the pathway leading up to the site, just to illustrate the existing lighting. I'll just quickly show you as well, so there's a lighting assessment submitted with the application, and this demonstrates, so there will be a need for lighting for security purposes for the multi-storey car park. This illustrates the impact of this lighting. So these images show the lighting that will be coming mainly from these lighting columns. This is the entrance to the site. So this is the eastern and the northern sides of the site. See the lighting on the roof. So this is probably the most lit area of the site. And then it shows the lighting being proposed on the more sensitive edges of the site, so to the west and the south, and this is principally restricted to this lighting, which will light an access footpath for security purposes along this edge. So at this point, I'm going to ask my colleague Katie Morgans just to come up to one of the tables, and she's going to give us a summary of her comments on landscape issues. Thank you. Yes.
I'm going to keep my mask on, I think that's okay.
I don't think anyone will be able to hear. Do you have a reason for keeping your mask on?
Only that I prefer to.
Just so.
Yeah.
I personally can't hear through.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Katie, do you want to try sitting down and see if that makes a difference? The problem is we need the recording.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I ask the members.
Yes? You can? Okay.
It's up to the chair, actually, Katie.
Shall we see how we go?
Okay, all right. So my name is Katie Morgans. I'm the Principal Landscape Architect here at Winchester City Council. So a landscape and visual appraisal, which I shall refer to as the LVA, was submitted as part of the application. In advance of this submission, a series of views were agreed with myself, the landscape officer, as being representative of the impact of the proposed development. These are the ones that are appraised in the LVA. The LVA provides discussion on the effects of the scheme in terms of landscape character and visual amenity, and additionally, in my capacity as landscape officer, I have exercised my professional judgment, knowledge of the proposals, and the site and its surrounding context to draw my own conclusions in respect of effects. I have not, therefore, based my conclusions solely on the LVA. I have assessed the landscape and visual impact upon the most important receptors, views from the South Downs National Park to the west and south of the site, namely St Catherine's Hill, viewpoints 6 and 7, the Water Meadows publicly accessible paths of the Clarendon Way and the Itchen Way, viewpoints 4 and 5, including the Wharf Bridge, viewpoint 3, as well as from Doman Road, also the Pilgrim's Trail, viewpoint 1. My conclusion is that the scheme has been sensitively designed on the elevations with muted colours, and that the effects of the proposals on landscape character and the visual environment are negligible, given that the proposals are in keeping and not out of character with the surrounding context of the Bar End industrial estate. This is described in the Hampshire County Council Townscape 2.8 Win 08, Winchester Industrial Estates, Winnell and Bar End, and that there is sufficient screening provided in terms of existing and proposed vegetation, along with limited visibility of the site. I am satisfied that I have sufficient information to assess the proposals and to make a firm recommendation on landscape and visual impact to the committee. The committee too has sufficient information to reach a decision having regard to my recommendation and other information. I should reiterate that the viewpoints assessed in the LBA were agreed in advance and that the LBA is adequate as a tool to assist my assessment, taken together with my knowledge of the area and professional experience. I'm familiar with the site and surrounding area, having visited on a number of occasions. The impact on the South Downs is acceptable and the South Downs National Park has not sustained any objection. The impact more locally to the site, including from Doman Road, Pilgrims Trail, Itchen Way and the Wharf Bridge, both in landscape character and in visual terms, is minimal and acceptable.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm now going to ask my colleague Richard Smith to come up, and he's going to talk to us about ecology, so the Winchester City Council ecologist. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Chair. So I'm Rick Smith, and I'm Principal Ecologist at Winchester City Council. My ecological consultation response consists of no objection, subject to conditions, which are included as part of the recommended conditions pack. I'll add at this point there are no objections from Natural England on designated sites. As part of my process, I have reviewed 10 main documents which have been submitted by the applicant to assess the potential for impacts of the proposals on ecological features. I've also visited the site. I know the locality and how it links to the wider green environment. So overall, as part of the summary of my consultation, there are 3 main potential ecological issues. The first one is the proximity of the site to the River Itchen, which is the SAC, European Designation Special Area of Conservation, and that's 190 metres away. It's also a SSSI, a site of special scientific interest, which is 20 metres away. That's a national designation. And really the main potential issues here are for pollution into the watercourse from the development. So these have all been dealt with documents that have been submitted and assessed, including the HRA, which is the Habitats Regulations Assessment. This has been assessed with an appropriate assessment and approved by the planning officer, as well as Natural England. There's also the Construction Ecological Management Plan. Sorry about all of these. That's been assessed and approved as well, and also the drainage report. So those documents provide for mitigation and assurance that the proposals won't result in pollution or impacts to the River Itchen, either during construction or operation. The second potential ecological issue is biodiversity net gain, and this has been assessed and will be delivered on site with satisfactory biodiversity enhancements. These have actually been proposed as part of a biodiversity mitigation and enhancement plan, which will deliver all these enhancements, and this again can be secured by a condition. The third issue, potential ecological issue, which has probably had a little more attention, is the western boundary woodland, which Simon's referred to. So the western boundary woodland has potential to support bats, and there are also potential issues of light spill from the proposed development, which Simon's already covered. These potential issues have been assessed and then the mitigation hierarchy has actually been applied. So avoid impacts, mitigate impacts, compensate for impacts. So on the slides, which I'm showing now, you can see the top section, which I'm pointing to, that's the Western Woodland. And what this diagram is showing, if you refer to the colour code at the bottom, is that no light spill enters the woodland. So since the first application, the designs and the positioning of lighting on the northern aspect have been moved, so no spill now enters the western boundary woodland, and therefore no risk of potentially adversely affecting bat species in that woodland. The lighting report, which we're referring to here, this is part of the lighting report, it concludes that no light above 1 lux will spill onto the western boundary woodland, and this has been assessed as accurate. There are also provisions within the design, which are anti-glare panels, to ensure that car headlights don't spill onto the western boundary woodland. So as well as the fixed lighting on the building, they've also accounted for cars within the actual car park. On top of this, further planting of bushes, hedges and newly planted trees has been proposed, and as this matures, this planting will further screen the western boundary woodland from lighting effects and therefore protect protected species which are the bats in the woodland. And the final point is that as part of this assessment, we've had an external suitably qualified ecologist who's a lighting and bat expert assess the woodland in August of this year, and he is in agreement with us that the western boundary woodland is of low value to light-sensitive bat species, and therefore the proposals are very unlikely to result in significant impacts on bats or protected species. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, so just moving on to the next issue, which is an important one, impact on residential amenity. So officers have looked at this very carefully, number of site visits. So just actually go back to, bear with me, the site plan. So the nearby residential properties are to the west on Donan Road, and then to the southeast you've got St Catherine's Court here. St Catherine's Court, closest to the building, the proposed building would be 18 metres away. The closest property on Donan Road, this one here, which would be approximately 15 metres away from the nearest corner. But it should be noted that the properties on Donan Road kind of arc away from the site as you go south. So as you go across west from the southwest corner of the building, the nearest property is about 35 metres away. So officers are obviously looking at the usual issues to be considered when we're looking at impacts on residential amenity. So whether the building is overbearing, overlooking, for instance. Sorry, let's get back to the correct plan. And officers are satisfied that given these distances towards St Catherine's Court and towards Donan Road and the intervening planting along the bank of Donan Road, that there wouldn't be any unacceptable overbearing impact or any overlooking that would affect privacy. A lot of attention is being given to the potential for loss of light arising from the building, and the applicant has submitted a daylight and sunlight report, which is a technical document analysing whether the building would affect daylight and sunlight. So this would be helpful to officers, but officers have also assessed this impact by looking at it ourselves and considering carefully based on our experience and really the distances involved and the orientation of the building. And officers are fully satisfied that there wouldn't be any harmful impact in terms of loss of daylight or sunlight. Just move on to the next slide, shows a bit closer the relationship between the proposed building, properties on Donan Road, and really, as you can see here, the bank and the treed embankment. So officers are satisfied that loss of light is not an unacceptable issue. Just show you some photos as well, which are helpful again from Doman Road, so reminding members of the embankment and the trees, the distances to properties here. And to give a view of it in winter as well, so during winter there will obviously be more gaps in the trees, but officers are still satisfied that given the distances involved and this relationship, that there wouldn't be any harmful impact through loss of light. As my colleague Richard mentioned, there has also been concern raised about the impact of light spill from headlights. And you can see on the image at the bottom, the concern would be then that cars parking up towards, for instance, the western edge of the multi-storey car park. Is there a potential for headlights to cause light pollution or light spillage, which could affect residential amenity? Officers again satisfied that this wouldn't occur. This is a closer section of the panelling that will screen along the edges of the car park. So the panelling is of adequate height to prevent spillage of glare from the headlights and to protect residential amenity as well as ecology, as we've seen. So before I conclude, the other key issue to be considered in relation to residential amenity is noise. My colleague Phil Tidridge here, he's going to come up and give some comments on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, Chair, members. My name is Phil Tidridge. I work for Environmental Health. The purpose for me to give you a little bit more of a presentation is, as members might be aware, there's been some concern over the noise and differences of opinion between an applicant's noise report and a noise report submitted by one of the local, on behalf of one of the local residents. When I make reference to that, I'm talking about the applicant was the Stroma Built Environment Revision C report, but there's also a 24 acoustics report reference 64391 revision 0, and also additional comment, which was all submitted on behalf of a local resident. I think members will be aware of that, as I'm also aware additional correspondence was sent to members yesterday by email that included all the 24-hour acoustics information by Harrison Grant on behalf of the local residents. So because of these concerns, what I'm going to try and do is give you a brief lesson on BS 4142 to help you assist you with understanding the methodology that's been applied in both of those reports. And then I'm going to cover the fact that because of those concerns, Environmental Health has actually done its own complete assessment itself. So first and foremost, my apologies if this gets a little technical. I should try and keep it as simple as possible. I think it's important that you understand a little bit about the methodology, because it probably will help you understand why there can be differences of opinion. Both the noise reports, the Stroma and the 24-hour acoustics report, used BS 4142 2014, plus there's an amendment A1 from 2019. In addition to that, there is additional guidance being issued by the Association of Acoustic Consultants in March 2020. That isn't statutory guidance, but it is often referred to. It's almost as long as actually the 4142 assessment itself. One point I'd like to make at this stage is BS 4142 is a methodology that gives an assessment of the likely noise impacts. It is not a document, as may have been suggested, that assesses statutory noise nuisance. Statutory noise nuisance is a totally different concept and operates under a different primary legislative regime, which is called the Environmental Protection Act. So it's important to note 4142 assesses amenity noise impact or likelihood of such and tries to quantify it. It does not give you a this will cause a statutory nuisance. And please be aware that is a different concept that, of course, environmental health deal with under other legislative regime. So what does 4142 do? Well, it tries to predict the noise from a new source, of, in this case, the car park. And this can be calculated purely from sort of primary data, or as is the case in this instance, from monitoring data from comparable other situations. This is then adjusted. It's adjusted for the distance and attenuation that's provided by the building and or other measures such as barriers. And the distance it's adjusted is to where the noise receptors are, the nearest local domestic residents in this instance. This gives you something called the specific noise level. I know there's some lovely terms here, so we start with something called a specific noise level. That specific noise level can then have what we could call penalties applied to it. And this is important to note because this is where there's one of the big differences of opinion. These penalties are added if the noise is considered more intrusive due to its character or nature. When you've adjusted the noise, the specific noise level data for all these penalties, you get something called the rating level. There are fundamentally three ways of adjusting that data, and I am going to just mention these because, again, they're important for you to understand why they can become a difference of opinion. Fundamentally, there are three mentioned in 4142. There's impulsivity. You can think of that as planks, bangs, thumps. It doesn't just necessarily have to be that. It used to say exactly that in the old guidance, but it can be more than that. But it's those characteristics that, if you think of it in those terms. So if the noise is particularly intrusive, if you like, due to that impulsivity. The other one is intermittency. That's a little bit easier to understand because you can think of that as, is that noise on and off? Because generally speaking, a noise that's there on all the time is considered less irritating than noise that comes and goes. And the final one is tonality. Again, a more easy understanding term I think we would have an idea on. That's where most of the noise is in particular frequencies. This can often be intentional. For example, car alarms, sirens, that sort of thing, but also can be due to certain features such as fans, pumps, and things like that. So you look at these, and these are given guidance in 4142 as to adjustments you can make, and there's different levels of adjustment you can make based on your assessment of how severe you think these impulsive, intermittent, and tonal natures are. But the important thing to note, this is a subjective decision. This is why you can end up with differences of opinion. So once you've derived your rating level, you compare this to a representative background noise level. The point to note here is there's a lot of debate about how do you derive a representative background noise level. It's representative, not worst case. And there can be a lot of variation on the background noise, depending when you take it, how long you take it, the meteorology conditions, the exact location you choose for that background level. And this can be another area of significant difference. There's a couple of points from BS 4142 I just want you to read you to, and I'm going to have to refer exactly to my notes here because I want to get this exactly right. And I think they're important, and you will see why. BS 4142 section 8.1 states, in regard to background noise levels, for this purpose, the objective is simply not to ascertain the lowest measured background sound level, but rather to quantify what is typical during particular time periods. I've made reference to this already, that it's about the representative background, and that's what 4142 says about that. Once you have your rating level and your background level, you compare the difference between the two. This is what's been referred to in the documentation you've been sent, is referred to in the Stroma report for our acoustics report. And it's this difference, the bigger the difference, the more significant the impact is considered to be. And I just want to cover exactly what 4142 says about these different types or levels of difference. And this is covered in section 11 of BS 4142. Sorry if this is a little bit of a run through 4142, but I think it's important so you can understand why you can have these differences. In section 11, it says the following. A, typically, the greater this difference, the greater the magnitude of the impact. B, a difference of around plus 10 dB or more is likely to be an indication of a significant adverse impact, depending on the context. C, a difference of plus 5 dB is likely to be an indication of an adverse impact, depending on the context. D, the lower the rating level is relative to the measured background sound level, the less likely it is that the specific sound source will have an adverse impact or a significant adverse impact. Where the rating level does not exceed the background level, this is an indication of the specific sound source having a low impact, depending on the context. So you can see there's these different criteria. It isn't black and white, it's not pass or fail. There is an interpretation, there is a range of results you can get, and as I've covered, BS 4142 has quite a lot of interpretation, both in the derivation of those corrections to the rating level for the characteristics of the sound, this tonality, impulsivity and intermittency, and can have quite a significant difference on how you measure the background noise level. So, having had a quick fly through 4142, and my apologies, it's the first time I've done that in that level of detail, I think we come to try and assist you to understand why there can be a significant difference between the conclusions of the Stroma report submitted by the applicant and the 24 acoustics report, which you were sent submitted by a local resident, which obviously you saw again was sent by email to you yesterday. Fundamentally, when you look at these two reports, there are two key differences. And these are the way they've established the representative background noise level, and secondly, the derivation of the noise rating level by selecting which corrections have been applied for impulsivity, intermittency and tonality. Those are the two reasons they've come to very significant different conclusions. So what do we do? The answer is we did our own survey. Not something we do that often, but we have in this instance. So myself and my colleague Abigail Toms is also present should you need to ask questions later, conducted a survey. We have, between the two of us, over 50 years of experience. I know that scares me at times, in assessing noise reports for planning and in all aspects of noise nuisance work. We've both worked here for a considerable period of time. Again, that's quite scary. And we have a full understanding of the local environment and the local acoustic environment in particular. So we attended the site for 14 hours. We didn't put noise equipment out and leave it. We were there all the time doing those measurements. Those measurements were during the peak morning noise period, 7 to 9, on 4 days. That was a Thursday to Monday, 23rd to 27th of September. Didn't do Sunday, so it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Monday between the 23rd and 27th of September. While we're there, as well as doing the noise measurements, we use these things called ears. It's very important because at the end of the day, a 4142 assessment is trying to assess what sort of an impact it would have. It's trying to model how you will respond. So actually, having these shows you how you respond. It's sometimes, I think, forgotten that actually any assessment is actually about trying to model how it impacts upon people. So it's important, we think, that we're there and attended the site, because this gives us a qualitative observation of the existing noise environment. What we could call the soundscape. It's a bit like a landscape, soundscape. It's a concept that's becoming more prevalent of recent. It's not about just the volume of the noise, but the acoustic quality of the noise. What's present in that noise? For example, sheep barring in a field, they're quite loud sometimes, but we would all consider that part of the natural environment and acceptable. So it's about the quality, and I will come back to this, of the soundscape. What do we conclude from our own measurements and assessment during that time period? We concluded that the most representative background level was 43 decibels. This was achieved by taking, getting a bit scientific, a modal average of the results on the Thursday and Friday. This is lower than the level presented in the Stromer report, which derived 48 dB, but slightly higher than the 24 acoustics report that derived 40 dB. The second thing we concluded, and the reason I laboured about these corrections, is that there was no necessity to correct the specific noise levels to derive the noise rating level. That's the corrections again for impulsivity, intermittency and tonality. We didn't think it was necessary to apply them. There are reasons for that, which I will explain to you. Firstly, the acoustic characteristics of the new noise from the car park are comparable to that already existing in the background noise environment. This is back to my point about the soundscape. They're not intrusive. They're not as noticeable. The second one you have to consider, which is covered in 4142, is when you're considering the acoustic characteristics, it's the acoustic characteristics at the receptor, not at the source, not what it sounds like at the car park, but what it sounds like at the place you're trying to model where the impact will be. In this instance, particularly local residents, properties, and such as on Doman Road. In the 14 hours that we stood by our noise meters, I failed to detect any comparable noise from the existing car park and ride site, which is adjacent to this site. You can't hear specific clonks, bangs, crashes, on and offs, or things like that. And that's an important observation. And finally, the other reason why we don't think adjustments are needed is focus has been paid in the noise reports to a worst case model scenario. It's important for you to realise that was a worst case, the ones that the 24 acoustic report makes reference to. The actual Stromer report models 3 different scenarios. But if you do look at the worst case model scenario, where you assume the cars all arrive between 7 and 8 and the car park falls off, that equates to my simple maths, about a car every 15 seconds. That is not an intermittent noise. That's a fairly constant noise. If there weren't many cars arriving, then you could say it was intermittent. But you can't have your acoustic cake and eat it. It either is less cars and therefore less noisy, or is more cars, a bit more noisy, but not intermittent. Another important point that we included is, in our view, the background noise levels are fairly consistent across Doman Road, as they're affected by various noise sources in the regional area, and in particular, road traffic noise. We also did do some monitoring on Monday afternoon to ascertain that the modelled AM peak flows, which are the subject of the assessment, are indeed a worst case scenario, i.e. is it worse during the day or later on, maybe in the evening, and all the cars leave again. So on Monday we did do some monitoring, and I'm satisfied the background noise levels in the PM peak are comparable to the background noise levels in the AM peak. So it's quite acceptable to base your scenarios on the impact during the AM peak. The final point that is worth noting is the background noise level in that area is quite variable. The exact causes I cannot explain fully. They are, I'm sure, complex, but we all know that in Winchester, certain things result in different noise levels being observed, and that's meteorology and in particular wind direction, as well as probably what sort of activity exactly are occurring in the wider commercial areas surrounding that one. So it is quite understandable, depending just purely on which week, on what the meteorology is like, the noise level could be derived, it could be different. And so it doesn't necessarily mean one is right or one is wrong. It's just a question of what you've monitored and deriving what you think is representative for the background. So, in conclusion, having had a little bit of a long discussion on 4142, all the results in our report that we've submitted as part of this assessment and is available to you, all our results when we do the calculations are less than 5 dB difference. In other words, the peak worst case scenario is no more than less than 5 dB and above background, and that is based on a worst case scenario. As BS 4142 says, this does need to be contextualised, so please bear in mind how we have done that. And this is that the impacts assessed will result in noise being audible, but only at times when we think the lower background noise levels at peak times are present. As I've also stated, it also relates to a modelled worst case scenario where it assumes all cars enter the car park within 1 hour, i.e. one car every 15 seconds. Therefore, if that does occur, as this is a park and ride, where most of the parking will be long term for the day, for most of the day, outside the rush hour, so there'll be little noise impact. Also, the pattern that would occur at weekends, compared to Monday to Friday, main working days, would also be different. As I stated, the background noise levels are affected by dispersed local noise sources, and I think it's quite acceptable to compare our result across the whole of Doman Road. And finally, to contextualise, as I've already made, the existing noise has the existing background noise already has existing significant road traffic noise present. So the proposed development will not introduce significant, what we could call foreign or different noise types. And that's an important consideration relating to soundscape. And the final point outside of my assessment I'd like to make, one that we've considered, this proposed site is on an industrial estate that already had permitted uses for other types of industrial activity that could have similar or comparable or even greater noise impacts. And also bear in mind all the background noise levels that have been taken whilst the site itself was not in use. And it could have been use of that site for a comparable industrial activity. Finally, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear, my conclusion is we remain of the professional opinion that an appropriate 4142 assessment of the noise impacts shows they are acceptable, and therefore we continue to offer no adverse comment in terms of noise amenity impact. Myself and Abigail Thomas are present, and even when the chair considers it appropriate, we will obviously try to answer any further questions. And my apologies for the somewhat lengthy run through 4142, but hopefully that helps explain why there can be a difference between two noise reports and help you try to understand in your own minds what you feel is therefore appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Simon, have you finished? No?
Not quite.
No?
Not quite yet. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Just to summarise my presentation. So Taking all these issues into account, the officers are satisfied that the application is in accordance with local plan and national policies. It's considered to be a well-designed scheme and it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We are going to now move to public speaking. As you can see from the top of the screen, this meeting is being recorded, and a lot of people do listen in from outside the meeting room. It is also being televised and will be uploaded onto the council's YouTube after the meeting. Now, in your packs.
Chair.
Yes, so Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. May I at this point suggest that we have a 10-minute comfort break before we enter the public speaking?
Yeah, if that's what you want. We've only been going an hour.
I know.
Okay. There is a request though that councillors leave the room and then come back because of sort of legal matters. So all those councillors wishing to take a comfort break, would you like to leave now and then return? If you could be back within 5 minutes, and then there could be members of the public. I can see some of the members of the public looking pained, but if someone's asked for a comfort break, I'm obliged to fulfil that request. So, councillors, anyone wanting a comfort break, if you'd like to take a 5-minute break and be back by 22, but could please nobody else leave the room, just councillors. chairman's discretion, and I am allowing 6 minutes for the two objectors, providing neither of them speak for longer than 3 minutes. And for the objectors, supporters, sorry, they also have 6 minutes to make it fair. And the same rule that no one person speaks for longer than 3 minutes. There will be a clock on the screen. Or you have 2 clocks? Just one chair, 1 clock, okay. And then all the other speakers have their normal time. Right, so I think we can go on then. So the first public speakers are Patrick Deer and Dr. Hurd. I don't know if you want to come forward, Dr. Hurd. And then you have 3 minutes each, and our normal practice is for questions, possibly from clarification from the committee. So you can see the clock in front of you. That's what will be indicating the 6 minutes. So it's going to wait until the end of the 6 minutes and then open up for questions, which can be either speaker, if that's all right. Okay, so you've obviously decided who's going first. Patrick. So when you're ready, Patrick, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I've long been concerned about the integrity of the planning process in our city, where the City Council is the applicant. You may recall, Chair, that in my last period as a City Council, I was Vice Chair of this committee, and the late Councillor Busher, an independent member, was Chair. We always ensured that any City Council scheme would be treated with great care, and no Cabinet member would have been given favourable treatment for promoting the scheme in front of party colleagues, as could happen today. In this particular case, despite the legal challenge and this new application, the building work continues without interruption. When I visited a couple of days ago, before the aborted September committee date, I was told it would be finished by Christmas. Looking at the site this week, the work has proceeded rapidly, despite this committee's crocodile tears about other developers proceeding before the grant of a valid permission. The City Council has failed to discuss and justify this resubmitted proposal in an open and transparent manner in public. At no point has the new application appeared on the agenda for the Council's Cabinet, which is promoting the revised scheme. There is total silence on the inducement from the enormous sum of public money promised by the Enterprise M3 Local Enterprise Partnership if the scheme is completed in this financial year. That is the largest project being funded in the whole LEP area. How on earth is this justified? This multi-storey car park is too near the centre of the city to fall within the proper concept of park and ride. We should keep cars outside the built-up area of the city. The location of this substantial building will create significant additional traffic on Bar End Road. But the proposal is contrary to the original philosophy of park and ride serving Winchester. Vehicles are now being encouraged to drive far too near to the city centre. The present park and ride sites at Bar End are at the margin of what was acceptable. A further extension of parking towards the city centre in a multi-storey building is contrary to the intentions of the Winchester Movement strategy. I strongly endorse the objections raised by the City Winchester Trust, where I'm a trustee, and also those of the Winchester Action on Climate Change and Friends of the Earth. The current application should be withdrawn by the Council, refused by this committee, deferred pending the outcome of the current legal challenge, or referred directly to the Communities Department, requesting a hearing by an independent inspector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Hurd, we now have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, I was looking at the clock. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I just want to make 3 points and to perhaps offer a solution. Firstly, declaring a climate emergency requires action, not words. Park and ride increases overall car use and therefore increases overall carbon dioxide emissions. That is incompatible with this council's top priority. To make a difference, you have to have a responsibility to act, however difficult your decisions are. The current park and ride provision is underutilised, with 600 to 800 places free on most working days. Companies are reckoning on about a 70% return to the workplace, so the 2019 Winchester movement strategy is now invalid. You have decided to spend over £7 million on providing an additional 164 parking places. That does not seem an appropriate use of public funds. Improving public transport and building social housing would have been much more acceptable to the public. Secondly, there is great concern about the integrity of the planning administration. This application has no public support, and I disagree. There are actually over 120 objections. So the council should be seen to be listening to sound argument and to respond accordingly. As a committee, you have taken a hard line with retrospective planning applications, yet here you are, presented with one by your own team. With the outstanding judicial review due in the High Court in 5 weeks, the committee must appreciate that the legal challenge remains strong. This second application has done little more than tweak the first. The public and this committee were let down by the first application. Work commenced on the site before this application was submitted, which suggests the council always intended to approve its own proposal. Objectors have put forward several areas of mitigation from April this year, but the applicant has adopted none of these. We're all aware this would never have occurred without the grant of £5.6 million. That sum and the time pressure to spend it has led this council down an unfortunate road. We would all agree, I hope, that this should not introduce bias, and this application should be assessed in the same way as a third party. Thirdly, there remain significant legal issues that were set out in the letter sent to you all yesterday. These will be tested in court, as they're the same issues as the first application. In summary, surely you have a responsibility to ensure that this application is considered without bias introduced by grants, time pressure, or being your own application. If you approve this, it will completely destroy public faith in Winchester's planning administration and be a very poor advert for local democracy. A solution: the credibility of the council to impartially determine this application is irreversibly lost. The committee is able to remedy this by asking the Secretary of State to call in the application and for it to be considered by an independent inspector. Otherwise, you should refuse the application.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. Thank you very much indeed. But please stay, because there could be questions of clarification from the members. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Howard, right at the beginning, you said 120 objectors. We were told by the officer the final count was 71. Are you saying that there is a difference?
There were a lot of late applications after the second amendment. There have now been 3 amendments, and there is a repetition from the same objectors. But as there are new subjects brought up, I think that's reasonable. I counted them through last night. It's about 123. I didn't divide them down into individual households, but it's certainly more than, well, I counted them twice last night. So, but it's just there is not a single person who's supporting the application on the portal, and there are huge numbers of objectors with very similar points of objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe the officer later on might like to make a comment on that.
Yeah. Councillor Roger.
Thank you. This is a planning committee, and we do pride ourselves in being independent of council decisions and everything else. I didn't hear many planning reasons for objecting to this proposal. Do you have any planning reasons to object to it?
I think that's a fair comment. I suppose with a second application, following on from the first, you would have expected significant amendments. The planning applications were made strongly to the first application, and the structure is identical to that first application. So I decided in my limited 3 minutes, I wanted to concentrate on, I suppose, the bigger picture, rather than the specific things. I have no expertise in planning, and there are many areas which were covered, I think, by the officer's report and by the experts, which has informed the committee and informed me. Thank you.
Mr. Davis, were you indicating you wanted to answer it too?
Only that I did touch on the major planning issue of the location of a park and ride scheme, which I think is contrary to policy, as indeed the representations which I referred to from the City Winchester Trust, Winchester Action on Climate Change and Friends of the Earth all elaborate how it is contrary to policy.
Thank you, members. Any further questions? No, so thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming along today. You may return to your seats. We now move on to the ward councillor, Councillor Charles Radcliffe. Good morning, Councillor Radcliffe. I think you're going to have your station cleansed. So when you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. As one of the local ward councillors of St Michael, I've been asked by local residents to share with you their concerns about the impact of this new car park on their homes, as well as the surrounding watermeadows and wildlife. Notwithstanding recent clarifications, doubts remain about the accuracy of the council's own assessments of the car park's impact on levels of noise, daylight and sunshine, particularly in Doman Road, the residential street that, as we've heard, runs directly behind the site. Residents also remain concerned about light pollution after dark and the prospect of car park floodlighting, headlights and security lights shining down into the gardens and bedroom windows of their properties. The City Heritage Trust, Winchester College, South Downs National Park, among many others, have voiced concerns that the car park will spoil views across the watermeadows, something that's only likely to become apparent once the leaves fall from the trees that are currently screening the structure from view. Several residents have also highlighted the negative effects of noise, exhaust and light on bats, birds and other local wildlife. Now, for the council to push ahead in the face of such concerns and set aside the related risks, as it is now doing, it needs to be able to point to clear social and public benefits. Benefits, in fact, that should be so significant that they outweigh any potential damage to residents' enjoyments of their homes and the risk to the natural environment. And for me, this question of risk versus benefit is key in determining whether this car park is worth supporting. The council, of course, will say if it can create more parking places on the edge of the city, in places like Barfield Close, more people will be encouraged to park there and to perhaps walk the last half mile or so to the high street. That in turn could relieve pressure on the one-way system, cutting congestion and pollution in the city centre, making perhaps more space in future for cycle lanes and wider pavements. I know many people living in my ward would welcome such an outcome, but it's hard to see how simply building more car parks on the edge of the city without at the same time significantly reducing the number of parking places in the city centre itself will achieve the desired result. As Friends of the Earth point out, there's already plenty of unused parking capacity in existing park and ride car parks. And if those car parks in Barfield Close and St Catherine's, very nearby, if they're not full, and they're often not, what makes the council think that a new multi-storey car park in Barfield Close will be? And then there's a related question I get asked, which is why now? With so much uncertainty about future commuting and traffic patterns and parking requirements post-COVID, why charge ahead now with a big new car park when we don't know if it's going to be needed in a few years' time? Madam Chair, there's no doubt that this car park is unpopular with local residents, especially those living along Doman Road. They're unhappy with the scale and height of the building, its positioning towards the back of the site, close to a residential street. They're unhappy about the way the council's presented its case, and they continue to question much of the data used to support it. And beneath it all, there's a maddening sense that the council is determined to push ahead regardless of what anyone has to say, and is now operating under pressure to complete construction by a fixed deadline in order to qualify for external funding for the project. Members should keep in mind that whatever the pros and cons of building this car park, approving the application will have negative impacts on residents and on the natural environment, and the council has a duty to mitigate such impacts and to properly address the concerns of those most directly affected. And in this spirit, I would ask that if you do decide to make this application, that you add a condition, a requirement on the council to take additional steps to mitigate the impact of the car park on those living nearby. Such steps might include, for example, limiting hours of entry to the car park, further increasing screening or repositioning lighting. Whatever measures are agreed, they should be implemented in consultation with local residents and others with an interest in conserving this beautiful corner of Winchester. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't go, Councillor Radcliffe, because there might be some questions of clarification for you. But no, there aren't. So, thank you very much. Thank you for coming along today. We move on then to the Cabinet member, Councillor Martin Todd. Oh, just wait a minute to have your station cleaned. So when you're ready, Councillor Todd, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to present today. I want to quickly talk.
Sorry, we haven't got the clock on.
Sorry, Chair, I can't put the clock on at the same time as Cat, so I'll do a manual. I'll do a manual clock.
Hands up or something.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Councillor Todd.
Thank you for the chance to present, to say a few words today. I want to talk about 3 main areas: visibility of views, lighting, and the need for the car park. And I'll try and be as quick as possible. Next slide, please. So this is an image of the car park at 10:30 on Tuesday morning. It's being constructed in line with the valid and legal planning permission, which is still in place, taken by, as any Cabinet member will know, the ferociously independent decision of this committee. You can see that it's broadly built up to full height. It doesn't have cladding, it doesn't have the dark grey and dark green paint, it doesn't have the green wall, so it's probably as visible as it will ever be. Next slide, please. This is the view from Wharf Bridge, and you can't see it. Next slide, please. This is the view just next to Wharf Bridge, and you can't see it. Next slide, please. And this is the view looking back the other way from the entryway, and you can't see it. Now, the view analysis is obviously the one you heard earlier, is the one you should make most reference to. But as you can see from the original image, it's well below the tree line, and it's well below the tree line when you're looking back the other way. Next slide, please. There's also the question of street lighting. So this shows street lamp 3 and street lamp 2 in Doman Road. You may wonder why I'm referring to the numbers. Next slide, please. This is a map of all the street lamps in the local area. It's in the public domain. It's on the SSE fault reporting website. On the left, you can see street lamps 1, 2, and 3 in Doman Road. On the right, you can see the street lamps in Barfield Close. And to the south, you can see the 25 unshielded street lamps in the existing Barfield Close car park. Next slide, please. These do operate on normal street light timing until at least 1 in the morning. I haven't been there to check whether they come off at 2, but you can see the lamps there on the left. Next slide, please. It's street lamp 13, which is actually in the trees. There is a question as to whether we might want to revisit the lighting scheme in that car park, but that is the context that we're in. Next slide, please. A quick few words about the movement strategy. This was agreed on March the 25th, 2019, by the previous administration, although it has been endorsed by this administration as well. It is a bipartisan document. And the number one priority work stream was about increasing park and ride, agreed by previous cabinet and the current cabinet. And importantly, it is a strategy, not a snapshot. It is designed to meet the needs of the city over the next 20 to 30 years. Next slide, please. Following the original approval in July 2020, we did phase 1 feasibility reports, again looking at the long-term needs of the district. And this highlighted, as it says here, a substantial expansion of park and ride services in Winchester is important to delivering the overall Winchester movement strategy. Overall Winchester movement strategy. And as it says there, it explicitly made reference to currently funding application stage to provide 300 additional spaces. You may be asking why it's 287. It's because the design was completely redone after initial consultation with residents to remove 13 spaces and move it away from Dover Road in order to address many of the concerns raised. Next slide, please. And why do we need so much park and ride? Well, if we take a long-term strategic view, we have 2,400 private non-residential spaces in the centre of town, in addition to 2,000 city council spaces, in addition to the on-street spark parking, some of which will need to be removed to enable walking and cycling initiatives. And 1,861 park and ride spaces, the current amount, is not enough to enable us to make the kind of dramatic reductions that are needed in the long term over the course of the strategy to cut the amount of traffic into the centre. And that is why there is this strategic imperative. Next slide, please. And an important point, because it's been implied, that you are here to decide on the planning issues. Many of the other issues that talked about are democratic issues relating to the decision of the council.
Sorry, Chair, I'll make that 5 minutes.
Right. I just want to.
Todd, you're just.
Yeah, sorry, I
the
wasn't able to
concluding
see the
statement.
countdown. So,
Mr. Todd, I'm sorry, you need to stop.
okay.
As the chair asked you to stop, you need to stop.
Yes, I've just said to Councillor,
Yeah.
you can have a conclusion.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, my concluding statement would just be, the planning committee decision is on the bottom right. All the other decisions relating to the Barfield Close car park made in public as democratic decisions, excluding the county council's decision to endorse the movement strategy, are listed there, just to show that it has had a decent level of scrutiny and democratic accountability looked at it.
Okay, don't go, because there could be some questions of clarification from the committee. Councillor Reid.
Councillor Todd, as you're well aware, the movement strategy was in 2019. Long before the pandemic, do you feel that the pandemic, you may have to revisit the movement strategy in the future?
Well, the movement strategy obviously doesn't just consist of the park and ride strategy, and it is a moving document. We have made a commitment as an output of the second phase report on the movement strategy that we will be doing a re-evaluation or evaluation to understand parking patterns in the future and how they need to be adjusted. But the fundamental need to move a significant proportion, the 4,500 spaces in the centre, not just our spaces, but the private non-residential spaces, remains. I don't see a scenario where we are not going to need more park and ride capacity to do that. And indeed, the commitment remains, for example, for a northern park and ride as well, which at the moment is the main extra park and ride in addition to this one that we're looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it, Councillor Todd. So thank you very much for coming along today. If you'd like to return to your seat, thank you. Esther will rush forward with cleansing wipes. And we now move on to supporter of the application. And you will have to share the 6 minutes, and as I said before, no one speaker can speak for more than 3 minutes. So we have a whole list of people here, but I presume that the agent is speaking. So if you'd like to come forward, and whoever else is speaking. Okay, so that's Catherine Bartlett, the agent, Andy Hickman, head of programme, and I'm so sorry, your name is?
Andrew Fraser, Queen's Counsel.
Okay.
I've been advising the applicant team of council throughout this process.
And so, in what order are you speaking? Are you starting?
I'm first.
You're starting? Okay, so just a reminder, 6 minutes and no one person speak for more than 3, and I'll have to stop you when your 6 minutes are up, but I'll ask you to have a concluding statement.
Chairman,
Yes.
in the light that there's more than 2 people, we normally leave it to them to determine how long they're going to speak, as long as they don't exceed the 2.
I haven't imposed any limits on them.
Well, you just said 3 minutes for one person.
Oh no, the only limit I have put on, or we have put on, is that no one person can speak for more than 3 minutes. Otherwise, they can speak for 2 minutes each, or whatever combination is left.
I'm grateful to Councillor Reid. I suspect that we would naturally divide up in a way that wouldn't offend against the rule anyway.
So can we get the clock? Are you giving us a presentation there? Clock's on. It was very confusing in the last one, the presentation. So should we go back to the beginning? Yeah. So when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
I'll go when they speak, Chair. Yeah.
Madam Chairman, Councillors, good morning. For those of you with a strong sense of déjà vu, my role this morning is simply to answer the question of why are we here promoting a second application. Just so that you're in no doubt, the first planning permission under which all of the work is being done remains valid and extant unless and until it is quashed by the court. That has not happened. But the reason we are here is if, and I emphasise with a capital I and a capital F, if the first permission is quashed, there would then be a half-built building without the benefit of planning permission needing to be completed. And so the City Council has simply taken the view that it ought to bring forward a further application to ensure that there is continuity of lawfulness with respect to that scheme. And all that needs to be said further is that you must, as in fact Dr. Hurd said, consider this matter completely afresh, looking at the planning merits. And my colleagues will speak to some of those, but I do pick up on Councillor Rutter's observation that thus far we've heard little at all in the way of proper planning objections to this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The confusion. My name is Catherine Bartlett. I'm an associate town planner of Stride-Triglawen, and just to reiterate, as with previous committees, our technical team of consultants are on hand to answer any queries or clarifications councillors may have this morning. You will be aware the input from our technical specialists has directly influenced the proposed design and supports the submission that has been made. The council, as applicant, have undertaken consultation with residents of Dover Road, both prior to the submission of the first planning application and during the course of the current application. And the concerns that have been expressed by residents of Dover Road have been listened to and considered, and these have been considered alongside the input from our technical specialists. So the second application sought to address a number of concerns in respect of lighting, daylight and sunlight, and the impact of the car park, particularly in consideration to nighttime views. Just to say in respect of lighting, it's important to note that the potential for headlight spill is only a relevant consideration when cars will be manoeuvring around the car park. The car parking spaces are actually orientated north to south, and therefore the headlights will be redirected away from the west and the east in the directions of residents. And I think that's important consideration when we consider the potential impact. In terms of the addendum to the landscape visual appraisal, this was done as a nighttime assessment of potential landscape and visual effects that the development of the site would have on the existing landscape. It concludes that there would be a negligible impact and a limited change to viewpoints 5 and 7. And viewpoints 5 and 7 are the ones that the planning officer presented. Viewpoint 5 is the Itchen Way, viewpoint 7 is from St Catherine's Hill. This is achieved primarily from setting the building back from its western and southern boundaries, which allows for additional tree and shrub planting in those areas. The proposed building being lower than the building to the north, the elevational treatment to reduce the light spill, and the inclusion of a dark, non-reflective and natural coloured finishes in respect of the cladding and staircalls, which means the building will be largely hidden from view and avoid standing out against its immediate surroundings. We've also proposed a landscape strategy that is primarily focused on the western boundary, because we always identified right from the beginning as a technical team that was a sensitive boundary. And so we have focused a landscape strategy that includes a native hedge, which will be planted at 1.5 metres to 2 metres.
Sorry, Chair, sorry to interrupt. That's 3 minutes for that individual speaker.
You've had your 3 minutes. You can finish your sentence.
And just to clarify, the main focus of our landscape strategy is on the western boundary, which is also focused with the green wall and western elevation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few words about the movement strategy. It's an adopted strategy. The City Council adopted it in March 2019, and the County Council adopted it in April 2019. And that followed extensive consultation. And the main priorities through that consultation were identified as reducing city centre traffic, supporting healthier lifestyles, and investing in infrastructure to support sustainable growth. One of the main work streams in the movement strategy, obviously, is park and ride. And this is identified as a priority, and it will have to deliver those priorities identified earlier. Okay, I'll just wrap up there. I think really what I want to say in terms of the movement strategy is the delivery of these 287 additional spaces is fully consistent with the movement strategy, and it's a vital early component in the delivery of the movement strategy and the Council's carbon and air quality targets. The delivery of additional park and ride capacity will enable other transport schemes to be brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 3 minutes, just 2 seconds then. So, councillors, any questions for any of our 3 speakers? Councillor Reid.
Sorry, Chair. Mrs. Bartlett, you indicated that the parking bays are situated on a north-south direction, but you must admit the car movement will be east to west. Otherwise, they can't come into the parking bays.
Yeah, no, I did to try to clarify. When they're manoeuvring around the car parks, they will be travelling east and west. But when they are parking and going up the ramps, that's on a north to south axis. Yeah.
Could I ask Mr. Hickman about the 12 residents reserved parking spaces, which is on the flat car park, I believe, and which residents will be offered those?
These are the residents that live in the terrace houses which front onto Bar End Road opposite the leisure centre.
Okay, so
they don't have any off-street parking, so there will be some discussions with those residents about use of those reserved spaces.
And how will those be managed?
They'll be managed by the City Council. We've taken this to Cabinet and agreed that we have delegation with the Cabinet member to agree how we will allocate those spaces with the residents and how we will charge them for those spaces.
Thank you. And then I had a question about the electric charging spaces. Do you think we have enough of those?
We do at the moment. I've checked with the Council's EV officer who's done the demand modelling, and he suggested the numbers that we put in at this stage, but we have built in extra capacity so we can add more in the future in terms of electrical supply and infrastructure within the car park and to allow that to expand.
And then in the many objections, there were concerns about how you would divert cars from the city centre to this car park.
Yes, this is part of the council's parking and access strategy, which needs to be further developed to identify how and when we do that. The process has actually already started. We are going to be fairly shortly be advertising the closure of one of the car parks in the city centre as part of the development proposal, which has been agreed by Cabinet. And then we also have another car park which has gone into the local plan list of sites as well. So that process is underway, but it needs to be more sort of formulation or agreement from Cabinet. But that is the intention, and that will be done in liaison with Cabinet in relation to future decisions.
Forgive me if I've missed this in the report. Will there be any coach parking?
Coach parking's provided at South Winchester Park and Ride site and at Worthy Lane car park. So we've got 2 lots of coach parking on either side of the city to enable people to access the coach parking without having to come through the city centre. So yes, we do have a local provision.
Thank you. Councillor Rotter, then Councillor Laney.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask about one of the advantages of this site is that it enables park and walk, and what sort of support are you putting in to enable and encourage park and walk? Can you tell me about the lighting? Will the lighting be reduced at night, and is there an element of it switching on only if it's needed at night? And I don't think there are any hours of operation in our conditions, but if you could just, is it enabled that the car park should be used sort of 24/7, or is there any restriction on that? Thank you.
So I'm just trying to remember the order of your questions. I'll just touch on the walking. The infrastructure, if you like, to support the park and walk has already been implemented as a result of the leisure centre development. So there's been enhanced footpath links already installed. There's lighting in association with that. So the infrastructure has already been implemented as part of the Winchester Leisure Centre development. So that supports the park and walk, the infrastructure.
I think I was thinking about extra signage and in what way you're going to encourage people to walk from the car park rather than catch.
Okay.
Yeah, what we're doing with the car park and access strategy is we're looking at signage. And the intention is that this route in from this part of the city will be one of our sort of exemplar routes. So we're looking at signage at the moment. Obviously, that's part of a different strategy, but it is in the council's plans and it is a funded element of work. And also the Winchester movement strategy. We've published the stage 2 reports recently, which set out the local cycling walking improvement plan priorities. And one of the main priorities in there is the route from the railway station to the leisure centre past this site. So we're doing some more work on that, and we're engaging with walking and cycling groups at the moment about how we might do that. So there's 2 other strategies which will come into play here to further enhance what we've already put in place.
Just with reference to the lighting inquiry, the internal lights will dim to 10% illuminance during periods of inactivity. And that's been set out consistently in both the proposals. Does that answer your question?
Hours of operation?
Yes, I mean the park and ride sites are generally speaking open 24/7. We have been asked to consider controlling that access with an access barrier, which is something that we could do with a minor amendment to the scheme. And we are looking at the infrastructure for that. So that is something that we could add in. In terms of operating the car park and its role, we wouldn't want to be limited to certain hours necessarily, because we'd like some flexibility around using the car park when there's events at the leisure centre, for example. However, we will manage it very carefully. Our car parking team are very experienced in managing car parks and multi-storey car parks. We have CCTV in operation in the car park as well, and we'll have regular patrols of it. So we will manage it in a sensible way, and if we do put in the access barrier, we would have the ability to control access at certain times as well.
Thank you. It's Councillor Lemmy next, but I'm just reminding members that there is a whole list of supporters, and you can ask questions of any of those people should you wish. Councillor Lemmy.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. First one being, when we were looking at the movement strategy, that would have been 2019, what would be the usage of the existing park and rides at that point?
Pre-pandemic levels, we were up between 80 and 100% usage across the whole park and ride provision. But the Winchester movement strategies looked at where people are coming from in terms of where they live to access the city, and there is still a great deal of demand from the south, as well as from the north, which has already been mentioned. But it did identify as a priority. This was a study work that W.S. Atkins did for Hampshire County Council, that bar end area should be a priority for that new capacity. And they have envisaged that demand will increase over time. Obviously, COVID has impacted on that. We do believe that given time, things will begin to return to normal. We will need that extra capacity, but this is also a car park which does enable people to walk into the city centre as well, as has been mentioned, which gives it another function really, because people may still be anxious about using buses. And this gives people a choice. They can cycle and walk from here. And we've also got the ambition to gradually reduce some of our city centre car parking, as has been mentioned, and reallocate space from the city centre to this car park. We've got a number of tenants who require space in the city centre. We've got a number of car parks that we've highlighted for closure. And there are a lot of also private non-residential spaces in the city centre. So we need to work with those businesses to encourage them, or in the longer term, require them to relocate their car parking out of the city centre. And that's how we'll begin to affect some change in the city centre, free up road space by reducing the amount of traffic on those roads, which will enable us to do other things with them. That includes on-street parking as well. We have a lot of on-street parking, so we will need to work with our residents if we want to put cycle routes on those roads where there's on-street parking, move those into car parks potentially, which will take up other space. So we believe we need this capacity for a number of reasons.
Can I perhaps just add that, having done anecdotally a number of cases around the country where there have been surveys of traffic movements since the pandemic, and the general trend is very much the traffic levels are recovering to close or actually at their pre-pandemic levels. So there's no evidence yet in the of any permanent change of weight on car movement.
And my second question is legal. We hear that we've got an application which has been referred to the court for adjudication. Now we have a second application for the same site. Is that abnormal, or is that a normal process that happens regularly?
It's relatively normal. However, one thing to say, to be very clear about, you used the phrase that the first permission has been referred to the court for adjudication. That's not really what's happened. What has happened is that there has been a legal challenge to the process, not the substance, the process by which that first permission was arrived at. One of the principal tenets of planning law is that courts will not interfere with the planning judgments made by a committee such as yourself. The challenge is purely to the process. So what is being argued about in the High Court in a few weeks' time is the process by which that first permission came to be granted. There were claims of various irregularities in the procedure, some errors in the data that was put forward. Part of the...
Mr. Fraser, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you short. I this is a planning committee and we don't need to go through the merits of the matter before the court.
I don't think I'd like to hear what the man would say.
You might, but we need to be very careful because the litigant is actually in the room here and it's not a material, and we need to go back to the material planning considerations. I concur with what Mr. Fraser said, but we just need to be careful when I'm advising the planning committee.
I'm not seeking to say anything about whether or not the challenge will or will not succeed. That's certainly not my role. It's not for this committee to consider.
Thank you.
The point is, it's important to understand that the notion that it's being adjudicated by the court is not quite right. And in terms of the procedure that's been adopted in terms of bringing forward further application, that's probably more possible.
So thank you for the explanation, but it's not, I believe, part of our consideration today.
No, quite right.
Okay, thank you. I have an ecology question. I see that your ecologist is Paul Roebuck. And my colleagues will know that I'm very concerned about the decline of swift. And is there any space to put in swift bricks or swift boxes?
We'll have to look closely at the detail on that. We put together an enhancement, biodiversity mitigation and enhancement plan, which I believe has bird boxes as part of the strategy. I don't have the information in front of me whether that's inclusive of swift boxes, but that could be something which they can be incorporated at height, generally in the eaves of buildings. So if there is space at height, and it could be done. So it's certainly something that could be considered and included.
Could I visit? Ask Mr. Hickman? And can we put some sort of swift box brick in?
We're always really keen to put in ecology enhancements. We certainly have on other projects, so we can certainly look at that. We can get some advice from the council's ecology officers as to what's appropriate and where it should go, but that should be possible.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions for the supporters? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Hickman. I don't know whether you're the right person to ask this question, or it's a landscaping question. I noticed that the Biffa site has got close bordered fencing at the top of the embankment. Currently, the potential car parking site has W-high palisade metal fencing. Has any thought been given to putting, because if you look at it in terms of below the crown, the tree crown and the ground base level, that's probably the area where there's more opportunity for sight of the car park from Durham Road. Has any thought been given to close bordered fencing along where the palisade fencing is currently?
We did think about boundary treatments and what was most appropriate along there. We have got a lot of tree roots in the area, so putting in close boarding fencing and new fence posts was considered not the best approach. And what we've gone for is something that would help ecology and biodiversity better. What we've gone for is enhanced planting on the embankment itself to fill in some of the gaps, and also a hedgerow alongside in front of that palisade fencing. So that will go in and be maintained at a height of 3 metres along there. It will have to establish itself, but it will go in at about 2 metres high, and we will grow it up and maintain it at 3 metres. So we've done that through landscaping rather than solid close board fencing, which we think benefits and will be better in the long run.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the green wall, and so I don't have a lot of faith in green walls. I have one in my ward which has been completely useless, but no doubt this, if approved, will be properly looked after and watered, but they do require a substantial amount of maintenance. So someone's prepared to keep the green wall alive?
Chair, the proposal is supported by a landscape maintenance and management plan, which includes for a 5-year period And our landscape architect is on hand to answer any questions virtually, I believe, if she's available. Is Sarah there?
Hi, it's Sarah Jones Morris here, the landscape architect. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Hi, yeah, the green. It's a climate-based system, so the plants are in the ground. They are not a pocket-based system, which you see in some areas. This is a far sustainable and much more, let's put it this way, easier to maintain. There's also an irrigation system. The better system with this as well is the fact that it's easier to maintain, and also if there is any plant failure, that's all caught within the maintenance strategy, and there's also a 5-year defects with this. So I would say this is a pretty solid approach to future maintenance.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Members, any further questions? So thank you very much for the team that's come along today. If you'd like to return to your places. And Simon, anything you want to pick up from what you've heard in the public participation?
Thank you, Chair. Just 3 very quick points. Firstly, the local planning authority has assessed the application impartially, robustly. Secondly, we're satisfied it is in accordance with the local plan policy and with the Winchester movement strategy. And then thirdly, I think what I heard was asking about the number of objections. I think at the beginning I was giving an update on the number of objections we've received since the amended plan, so I can say that. I'm not contesting the number. The overall number may well be up to 120. The number that I gave was simply the ones we received in addition. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I have read them all. Would it be fair to say that some of those are, some people have written several objections and some people have written the same as they've objected beforehand?
Yes, Chair.
So, members, we are now going to go into questions and then there'll be debate. So I'm guessing that there'll be at least an hour and a half before we vote. Are we okay to carry on? And the request for a debate. So it's the same as before, really, that members, would you like to, if you want to leave the room, does any member want to leave the room? No. No, okay. So if we could try and isolate the members, this is just protocol. We could isolate, we don't normally have breaks in the middle of a meeting. So if we could allow. In the morning we do, but we don't normally do it in the middle of a meeting. So if we could allow those members, and it would be me included, to go out and then come back, and then, but we will have a break until 1:45. Okay, but if you want to leave the room, could you wait for the members to come back? And members, could you hurry back? application that we've reached now is questions. Now, this is a different report, members, to what we normally get. So on page 21, they've got the following planning considerations remain unchanged. But you might have questions on those, but we'll come back to those because not everybody on the committee was here for the last application anyway. So shall we start with the headings on page 22, bearing in mind that you might want to go back to the points on page 21 at some point. So design and layout. Any questions on design and layout? It's on page 22. Yeah.
This is then duplicated again because we have design and layout on page 53 as well. I had anticipated it being the planning considerations on page 47.
Let me just check that. Okay.
Chairman, your permission would help. I would suggest that you take it through from the main report, the earlier report, which starts at page 47. And then what we would ask members to do is have regard to the supplemental paper that was submitted at that time, and also the addendum report that now starts from page 22. So it is asking members to sort of jump around a little bit, but that would follow our usual headings then, Chair, if that helps.
I'm afraid all you've done is confused me. So I'm happy to start wherever members want to start. What was your suggestion, Mrs. Kennedy?
Chairman, I was suggesting that at page 47 is the original report that we had before us at the last committee.
Yeah.
We have a supplemental paper that came as the update sheet of that. And then also we have the addendum report, which provides an update today. So I wondered if members went through from page 47 and started on the heading Principle of Development, but then also have regard to the later update in that report and the addendum report that in front of you today. So you would ask questions across those three papers, Chair.
Say this.
Yeah,
What is your question, Councillor Reid? And then we will go from there.
Chair, I haven't got a question. What I was just trying to point out
Yeah.
that page 47 seems more.
The
Yeah,
report.
just jump in,
Fine.
because
Go ahead.
apologies, I put the reports together. If we start at page 47, Chair, that will cover all of the headings that we need to.
Okay.
So we might have to jump back into the addendum report, which adds further detail if needed. But if you work through from page 47, Chair, it will cover all the headings that we need to.
Page 47.
Chair, can I make another suggestion? Sorry, that Mr. Avery help us. And if there is something in the second report, I'll call it, the update report, that you need to refer to, he'll just stand up and let him know.
Yeah.
All right.
For anyone listening, everything will be covered. It's just a question that members know which pages they're looking at in the report. And it's page 47, and it's Principle of Development and Policy Context. Any questions on that? No? So we move on to the next heading.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification. On page 47 under policy context, there's a reference to the design chapter 16 of the National Planning and Policy Framework. I believe the design chapter is actually chapter 12. Chapter 16 relates to the historic environment, and I wonder if we could just have clarity of correction there. Thank you.
Chair, yes, I haven't got that document in front of me, but I would think, I'm afraid that is a drafting error and it should be chapter 12.
Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Excuse me, Chair, can I just ask Mr Avery to clarify exactly what Chapter 12 covers, and that he did mean Chapter 12 when he wrote the report, it's just a typographical error.
Chair, I don't have that document in front of me. The design, I believe the is correct, and Chapter 12 relates to achieving a well-designed places, which is the correct reference here. I should have put in the report.
Okay, so the next heading is design and layout, which is on page 53, and it's equally on page 22. I had a question, if I may ask that. Has the lighting column been moved?
Do you mean in the recent amendments, Chair?
Yes, yes. I mean, I've got it as a question on page 22. But it doesn't say anything about the lighting column. I just picked it up from the objection letter. But it hasn't been moved, is that what you're saying?
Chair, from the previous application, the lighting column's been moved, but not in the current application.
Okay, thank you. And why was that?
From the previous application, which isn't being considered now, the lighting column was moved because of the concern about impact on the woodland.
Right. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? So on page 55 now, the visual and landscape impact on the areas. Councillor Reid.
In the photograph you very kindly showed us, there was the crane. Can I be assured that the crane did not stick at the height of the proposed structure? It was in fact a lot higher.
Yes, Chair, it's a lot higher, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Bronk.
The report says that visual or the dark skies aspect will be addressed in visual impact. Page 41, sorry, I'm taking you backwards, refers to the South Downs concern that there would be the visibility of lights and luminance of the surface itself will create a source of sky glow many meters above the surface of the ground. It says somewhere else in the document that the South Downs didn't have any further concerns or something, but I take, if I've walked up 5 flights of steps and I don't want to go any further, I'm at the 5th floor, I'm not at the ground floor. So if they say they don't have any further concerns, my concern is whether they still have reservations about significant sky glow. So are you able to assure me, because I didn't notice any specific reference with all these comments about daytime views across the park, that the overall amount of glow has been addressed by the fact that dark materials aren't going to be reflecting light, because we have taken in other committees decisions extreme care to stop even one resident having sort of an aperture affecting the dark sky at night, even when they don't live within the park. So when we saw on page 141 the extreme amount of light being emitted from the building, even on the east side, which would potentially affect the dark sky of the park, I just want to make sure that we've addressed that to be fair to everybody else to whom we apply the dark skies night policy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the building has been designed very carefully in terms of light. So there is the dark, non-reflective cladding, which encloses the building. That is all of the lamp columns that sits higher. They sit below the level of that. The lamp columns themselves direct light down. They are relatively low luminance as they can be. And in terms of, there are a lot of measures, mitigating measures that have reduced the amount of light. But as well as that, just to reiterate, the South Downs National Park have said that they have no further objections. They're saying they do not have any objections, full stop, to the proposals anymore. Thank you.
I think Councillor Bronk was concerned from the top of the building, that would then no objections would include from the top of the building.
Yes, Chair.
Any other questions? So on the next heading, is the daytime impact, which is on page 56. There being no questions, we've got Doman Road as a separate one. That's on page 57. And also on page 24, there's impact on neighbouring amenities, which includes obviously Doman Road. I'm sorry to ask you to look at 2 pages, but you've probably got your questions anyway.
Sure.
Councillor Reid?
I'm not terribly sure if this is the right place to put it in, but with regards to the proposed wall, green wall, do we have any indication as to how long that would take to come into a reasonable effect? I'm thinking of the number of winters that it will have to go through, and those trees that exist there at the moment are deciduous.
Chairman, I might need to call upon the landscape officer to perhaps give some advice on this, how quickly it will establish and grow up. There is a 5-year maintenance plan to ensure it will get going. I would ask for some advice about how quickly green walls would establish themselves.
That's with 18 onwards.
Yes, if 18 as or.
Hi, I actually haven't studied the specifications, so I don't know what size the plants are going in. It might be better for the applicant's landscape architect to answer that question.
I'm not an expert, but normally there's a minimum height requested, which was the problem that I had in my ward, because they put in lower than that and it never grew. But anyway, is someone going to answer that? Okay, so we'll come back to you while you're finding the specification. Councillor Bronk.
Thank you. Whilst that's being looked at, can we confirm that the green wall will not be deciduous, so that the green aspect of it will remain throughout the year in that case, because Virginia Creek will lose its leaves?
Yeah, it's a mixture of evergreen and deciduous, so there will be elements of both. That's off the design, and whether the applicant may well be able to explain why it's a combination.
Right, so we'll get the answer eventually. You've obviously a lot of documents associated with the application. So on page 58, we've got South Downs National Park to the west of the site and South Downs National Park longer distant view, including from St Catherine's Hill. No questions. So then I think noise comes up. Now we've had a very full explanation of noise. And so any further questions? Phil and Abby are still here with us. Any further questions on noise? We've also received quite a lot of representation on noise. Any further questions, or have we been told everything we need to know? Yeah. So it seems so. So we've done noise and we're ready with the green wall.
Yes, we've heard from our landscape architect that can be anything between 2 to 5 years. The application is also supported by a landscape performance specification for the green wall system. So there was further information submitted in support of the green wall with the application documentation. I can't give it here.
Okay. So there was a question of the minimum planting height.
Not that I'm aware of now, but for it to become, just to clarify, for it to be fully established, is the period between 2 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? No.
Just on the decisions.
I think Simon's answered that, but it's a mixture. Yeah. Mixture of evergreen and deciduous, I believe. Yeah. Yes. Because sometimes these russet ones that lose their leaves are quite attractive, aren't they? When you have those. Okay. So we have talked about daylight and I think possibly nighttime, but nighttime is the next heading on page 61. Would anyone like to ask further questions on the nighttime impact? If not, then we have had a lot of information, so presumably everyone's questions have been answered. We then on page 65 have impact on daylight and sunlight. And then on page 67, on page 66, overbearing and outlook, which includes Doman Road again, and St Catherine's Court. And then we move on to lighting and privacy and trees, which are on page 67. And then page 68, highways and parking, which also goes on to 69. Ecology, page 69 and page 70 and 71. Drainage, page 72. And then we have noise again. And then the asserted fallback position and other matters, page 73. I'm just going to check that we've covered everything that you thought we should cover, Simon, which is on page 22. Yes, have we covered biodiversity again?
Chair, it is included as part of the ecology section in the main report, so yes.
No further questions on anything? So debate. Councillor Lehman. Yes, Councillor Russell.
Can we consider resolution for stipulation on opening and closing time?
Sorry.
Can we look at putting a stipulation on opening and closing time on the upper floors of the car park?
Can we look at what? Sorry.
Putting an opening and closing time on the upper floors of the car park.
Right. That's a question. I think the agent said they didn't want to be tied to any time. but they would be reasonable. Is that what we heard?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. That is what we heard, wasn't it, from the applicant?
So you've got a different proposal?
Yeah, can we stipulate that it's open from, say, 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night?
Right. Do you have a seconder for that? No?
I'll second.
Okay. So the proposal by Councillor Leaming, seconded by Councillor Rafal, is that there should be hours of operation from 7 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night.
On the upper floors.
Sorry?
On the upper floor.
The upper floors.
On the upper floors? Yeah. What do you mean by the upper floors?
The second and third floors of the car park.
Okay, right. So those in favour of that?
Chair, I'd like to speak against that, if that's possible.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Well, we have heard from the applicant that they're going to carefully manage the car park, carefully monitor the car park, and that they have the ability to bring in closures and so on if it's necessary. So I'm happy to let the car park operate, and if it turns out that it's a problem in the future, then we can, you know, I'm sure that there will be enough political objections that will bring in some sort of closure, but I'm not convinced at all that there's any necessity for us as the planning committee to introduce those hours of operation at this stage. Thank you.
I'm only really considering the local residents.
I'm very considered about the local residents, and I think that enough mitigation has been put in place. But anyway, so I oppose this proposal.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say you have heard from your environmental health officers about noise, and presumably it's that reason that you were thinking that you might like to limit some usage above the floors. Perhaps if members could tell me if that wasn't their suggestion. I think it would be difficult to control the upper floors only. Obviously, we've got an entry and egress point, haven't we, at this car park? And I would also think it's 7 o'clock in the morning is probably a little bit late, you know, for people coming in, parking and striding. Chair, but I just want to leave those thoughts with you. Thank you.
There's two ways of looking at it. They either impose a condition limiting, or if there's a problem, then an amendment comes in to sort out the problem. And I think personally, I'd rather that than you know, the other way around. But we've had a proposal and we've had it seconded. So those in favour of limiting the, let's get it right, limiting the hours of operation on the upper floors, which you've heard from Mrs. Pinnock is difficult to manage, but on the upper floors between, so only 7 till 10 o'clock is what you're saying. So those in favour? 2. And those against?
7, Chair.
Okay, so that falls. Any further questions before we go into debate? Councillor Rotter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very conscious of the importance of this decision, but I'm very conscious of the importance of us making this decision based on proper legal planning reasons. And I want us to bear in mind that this site is in the middle of an industrial estate and has been in the middle of an industrial estate for decades. In fact, hundreds of years, because actually the Itchy navigation was probably the industrial centre of the city when 200 years ago, when people were using that as the main access into the city to bring in goods and so on into Winchester. It's on a main commercial route into the city. It predates the houses on Doman Road and has a long history of industrial use. So that is the context in which this is. So it's not a green site, it's not a forest that we're building a car park in, it's an industrial site. The existing building, the previous building has been knocked down. And so that is the context. I know it very well. I enjoy the walk along the Itchen navigation. And for me, the building which most dominates that view, and I've done it very recently, is not the new car park being built behind the trees, but in fact the German road houses themselves, which dominate views from the path and from the national park as you come into Winchester. People have asked for us to close central car parks before we start building this, so I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. But it will enable us to look to close more of the central car parks in Winchester. What attracts me to this particularly is it's a park and walk site. It's perfectly reasonable to ask people or encourage people to walk from this site into the city. Very attractive walk along the river and through the water meadows and so on. So I'm very encouraged to hear what is being done to make this an exemplar walk back into the city, various different routes depending on where you want to go. It remains a key commitment of the Winchester Movement Strategy, which has all party support and in fact strong community support as well. The building is well screened, has been very carefully designed. It's using a maximum amount of photovoltaic cells, which makes it effectively energy neutral. There are plenty of electric car charging points, and those can be increased in due course when that's necessary. It's low profile and it's well clad with virtually invisible, it will be virtually invisible from the sensitive sites around it and across the river. This application has been probably more thoroughly assessed than any I've ever seen. Officers have worked tirelessly to impartially determine this application. This committee thrives and prides itself on its independence. I know I've voted in my time against applications from the City Council, and we wouldn't hesitate to do so again if we believed that there were genuine, strong planning reasons to do so. I am convinced that it's going to be carefully managed, and therefore I resisted the recommendation to restrict hours, unless this proves to be necessary. And I would be very pleased to hear from any residents in due course when it's open and operating. If that turns out to be an issue, I am absolutely convinced it won't. I am absolutely convinced that it will not negatively impact either on local residents or on wildlife. I think everything has been done that could possibly be done to conceal the building and to mitigate any lighting and any noise. And given the situation and the fact that it is already in amongst all these other points of light and noise, I think the actual impact on neighbours will be absolutely, well, I doubt if they'll notice it's there, as you don't notice it's there when you walk past, so look fine. So in planning terms, there are no reasons to refuse this application, and I will be supporting the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further contributions? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard and I understand, I believe, the various objections that have been made to this application. This is a liminal site on the border of a long-established industrial site, and on the other hand, residential roads and indeed a national park. It is almost always liminal sites like this that produce the most dispute and concern. And it's right that we have given these concerns very full investigation over a significant period of time. However, it seems to me that the application is compliant with the local plan and other policies. I note that statutory bodies do not object to it. And I believe that the benefits are significant. It is in line with the movement strategy and an important contribution to the reduction of pollution and, above all, the social and economic development of our city centre. I shall therefore support the application.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying not to go over what has already been said. The nearest structure to the proposed site is 15 metres away. And I know when we look at most planning applications, we usually have in mind a 20-metre distance from one property to another. So this one is quite tight on the boundary of this particular property. However, the topography of the land, you have to look at it in a slightly different manner, I believe. I think that will work as long as the landscaping is correct. I think that in fact works, as you quite rightly say. There are many green walls which, shall we say, tend to get brown very quickly. So it is a concern. I think it is crucial, 2 to 5 years for it to be established. But let's hope it is, because everything, well, a lot of it does hang on this green wall. The main concern that I had, and even in the last application, was light spell. Only yesterday I attended a workshop on planning for Winchester, and one of the things that I brought up was our proximity to the boundary of the national park. We have a long boundary with the national park. 40% of Winchester district actually is in the national park. They have this policy of dark skies, which is somewhat difficult if you're living on the edge. If you're on the right side of it, you can put in at this point in time as much illumination as you like. However, the boundary itself, or should I say the light, doesn't respect the boundary. So that is a concern that I put forward yesterday when we're looking at a future plan. In this particular case, the Southdale National Park has a finger right into the centre of Winchester, or very close to the centre, which makes it, yes, an ideal place to have a walking car park. I was impressed by the presentation of our officers with their technical information. Some of it flew way above my head, without a doubt, but they believe and they put it over as though it is right, and I hope it also is. They are the ones with the technical expertise. We are here to sit and listen if we don't possess that technical information ourselves. We've got to trust our officers, and we hope our officers do have it right. If not, lo and behold, we will know as members, because our residents will tell us in no uncertain tone. The fact that on this occasion there has been very little planning reasons for going against this particular recommendation, I'm inclined to go with the recommendation of the officers to permit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Of the many very areas that were of concern to the residents, I think 3 in particular were of concern to me in majority of cases: noise, visual and landscape assessment, and lighting. The 2 noise surveys, Stroma and 24 Acoustics, into the background noise levels were taken, I have to say, under very different meteorological conditions, giving, not unsurprisingly, 2 different background noise level outcomes. A 3rd noise assessment report, submitted as a technical noise comment, was then conducted by the applicant, and taken between Thursday the 23rd and Monday the 27th of September. Now this covered a representative 3 days and a Saturday, and found the background level was very highly dependent on wind direction, wind strength, general road traffic, existing park and ride, recycling centre, and several other noise sources within the Bar End industrial estate. Given the numerous combinations of influencing factors at different times of the day, it wouldn't surprise me at all if a dozen noise assessments gave a dozen different background noise levels of the outcomes. It therefore seems logical to me to take an average of the two that we've got before us. That would, taking them, that this would produce a less than 5 decibel increase. Now, I was looking at the decibel levels between 0 and 5, 5 and 10, and 10 plus. And I believe that anything less than 5 decibels would not generate a significant or an acoustic, adverse acoustic impact. And I certainly wouldn't do so in Dunham Road, Barfield Close and Bar End Road. On the visual landscaping assessment, looking at Coventry House. Coventry House had a needs height of 9.4 metres and a ridge height of 13.2 metres. The car park at its tallest within the stair cores will be 3 metres lower at 10.22 metres. I visited the car park on Monday, and to be quite honest with you, it looks as if it's practically fully built height at this point in time. I then walked along Dunham Road. Now this is 5 metres below the ground level of the car park. So at nearly 10 feet lower than the previous building, I was still unable to clearly see the construction through the existing woodland pipe. Only filtered glimpses through the trees. When added to the non-reflective dark brown cladding, this gives me much greater confidence that the landscaping scheme and the additional woodland tree and shrubbery planting, and in fact the green wall that we've all heard so much about, facing the western side of the car park, that I'm almost certain that will mitigate the visual material considerations from Dunham Road and the Itchen Valley navigation. On lighting, another material concern which I was worried about was the ground level, both short, low level and long view light spillage, as well as the internal lighting and car headlamps from the upper decks. So given its dark sky policy, I was particularly eager to hear the reaction of the South Downs National Park Authority and its feedback to the projected lighting impact. And I was relieved to learn that the same non-reflective dark brown cladding and no light spill above 1 lux within any part of the western boundary would now be incorporated into the development. Lux levels within the building and strategically placed barrier screens at headlamp levels are crucial to mitigating the potential light spillage. In regard to the additional information submitted by the applicant regarding landscape character and visual impact, the South Downs National Park carried out their own assessment. They looked at the additional information and raised no further concerns to this proposal. I'm therefore content that the lux levels are such that it will have minimal impact on residential amenity in Dunham Road and beyond, and conform to South Downs National Park dark sky policy. I think the condition that the application has been conditioned to within an inch of its life. I'm satisfied that the planning and operational conditions imposed mitigate against interior planning considerations and concerns of residents, so therefore I will be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benthead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I've heard what all the other councillors have said, and I could repeat probably quite a lot of what they've reported as well. I deliberately went there this morning to pay another visit, and I there early in the Barfield car park, and I went down into Doman Road, down a slippery slope, I have to say. But I stood there for a long time listening to the amount of noise, and as advised by our environmental health officer, I use my ears, even though I have hearing aids and I can hear quite well. And the noise was minimal down there. And then I walked along the road and observed exactly as Councillor Cunningham did. The screening is pretty good at the moment. All right, it is still not winter time and the leaves haven't all dropped, but it is very well screened already. And touring the whole site around that area, did a long walk. I can understand all the objections, and that's why I thought I need to take a little bit more time to do that second visit, particularly the sound ones, but I'm not convinced that the noise is going to be a nuisance. An observation I made was that obviously the house is in Dover Road. The view they want to look at is the one going to the South Downs Park. And they've got lovely views out to the South Downs Park. Their view the other way, it's green at the moment and it will remain green. So they're very lucky. Whereas they should not be able to see too much of this car park. I think it's in a good position. I think I'll stop there. What other people have said.
Thank you. Any further comments? And I too have obviously been to Derman Road several times. I have stood outside every single objector from Derman Road. And what we heard from our noise specialist, Phil Tidridge, was that you hear the noise of the traffic going up and down the road as well. I am satisfied. It's never nice when something, the unknown, is built next to you, but I am satisfied that it isn't going to be a matter of a large concern to the Derman Road residents and Catherine's Court. The bank is quite high and substantial. And I understand that, you know, we've heard from Phil Tidridge that when you take a noise reading, it's bound to be different from someone else. I forgot to ask Dr. Hurd, but I will mention it now, why yet again we had something from his lawyers in very late with another noise assessment. And it was annoying for it to come in so late, because I had a meeting in the morning and then I had to abandon my afternoon meeting to read this document that came in, which I did. And then I had another meeting in the evening, which I managed to get to. But the same thing happened at the last application, which we had to defer. So, you know, it's a pity that people don't get things in time. And also we had another one yesterday, which was quite abusive, and that is unnecessary, really. You know, we know that people have strong feelings about things, but you don't need to be quite so abusive to us all. But we are a professional committee. We're apolitical. We're all sitting, not in party groups. You can see how much work has gone in. People who are listening can't see this, but people in the room can see. This is the size of the report. And this is a huge report, an enormous amount of reading, which the councillors have all done professionally. And I would like to thank the officers who put so much time in, case officer and all our consultees, in bringing the evidence to us. And I too see no reason to refuse this application. It's an industrial site, a formal industrial site, and there could be something much worse and much noisier there. We've had no objections from the South Downs. I sit on the South Downs National Park Planning Committee. They do permit things with lights. They just ask that the light is directed downwards. So, you know, they don't say no lights. They just don't want lights going up in the air. We've got no objections from National England. the work that's gone on has already been explained several times by the portfolio holder and by our legal advisor that it's all perfectly legal. It's not retrospective. The work has permission, and that's why they're going on. And then we heard from the portfolio holder that this is what the city is going to need for the next 20 years. And there's obviously been an enormous amount of analysis of that, and that's what the movement strategy was all about, supported cross-party. So I do think it's been a very professionally looked at application, and I have no hesitation in approving it. So have we got to the point of the vote? This application has been recommended. Oh yes, Mrs. Bennett wants to clarify something which Councillor Cunningham said.
Yes, please, Chair. I think it was just a minor point, but I think Councillor Cunningham at the beginning, you were saying that there's been a further report by the applicant. I think what you meant was it was a response by the City Council's Environmental Health Officer on behalf of the local planning authority as consultee. That's
Yes,
what we heard from
there's a technical noise comment.
That's right, from
That's exactly what it is.
not the applicant, from the LPA as consultee chair from Environmental Health. That was, I just wanted to clarify that point.
Fine.
So this application has been recommended for approval, with all the conditions that are found in the report. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair.
So that application is approved, and that is the end of our morning session. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along, and the public speakers for their input. And members, I believe, lunch, sandwich lunch.